All right. Hopefully you all can hear me. Let me know in the chat, please, for the few of us that are in there currently. If you can hear me coming in, we're going to, right off the rip, get this started. Still kind of prepping some things, making sure I have all my graphics ready to rock. I don't know why my Elgato control center is only picking up on one of my lights. Let me try to reset it, see if we can get some light in here. I guess we'll just use the one. That's fine. But good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in over on Just Weather. I'm not too sure why I made Travel Jet Setter mad. That's my cue to go. I will return once Jonathan comes back. I mean, I love Jonathan personally. Fantastic. But at the same time, you got to show some love to the rest of the Pinpoint Weather team. Perfect. Cheryl, thank you. Cynthia, thank you so much. Kevin Hawthorne, good to see you. Lawrence, my phone won't set up to view, spinning, logging out, try to come back on. Hopefully you made it back. We're going to talk all things severe weather out there right now because we have quite a bit of action going on already in the south. Moved out of Texas and Oklahoma, and now we're getting into Louisiana. I know Shreveport was just blasted. I was in a TikTok live moments ago, and there's a lot of folks out there without power. So bear with me while I get this fully set up and prepared. I'm going to start us off with the radar so we can just take a look at what's happening right now. Bring you up to the national radar so you can see. Marinda, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you tuning in from not so local, that's for sure. So here is where we stand currently. This is our national radar. You can see that long, what's called quasi-linear convective system underway. This is going to be producing lots of damaging straight line winds. I believe we're seeing anywhere from 60 to 70 miles an hour on the leading edge of that line as it continues to barrel off towards the east. We have a special weather statement in place for Houston, southeast Texas, and we're getting ready to get the severe line fully out of Beaumont, Texas, and into southwestern Louisiana as we speak. Dream Talking with Vicky, thanks so much for tuning in. Mimi Love Good Law, it's good to see you again. Recognize the username from our Tropics lives. It's definitely been a hot minute since I've streamed on here. We wanted to try to keep the live streams for these type of weather events. And you can see right now we have some big time stuff going on over Louisiana. We'll go in for a bird's eye view. Earlier during the TikTok live I did, this system right in through here, let me get the Telestrator tool out so you all can see what I'm talking about. There is a cell right in there. There goes another tornado warning. As a matter of fact, right in through here, I was just getting to start to talk about that as well. Because of how fast this line is moving, you will more or less get occasional spin-ups right along the leading edge of where it's located currently. So that's not good. We have a fresh tornado warning out there. Yes, it is almost over, Laura Thompson, for Beaumont. We're almost through. You can see right through here, we're on the southern periphery of that. You're just to the south of where a new tornado warning has just spawned into the north of Jasper, headed towards Leesville and Alexandria. If it holds together, this is a fast-moving line, so I don't foresee it holding on to too much of its intensity. These are actually going to be very quick spin-ups, very short duration. They're not going to last for very long, which is a good thing. However, they can sneak up on you at a moment's notice, so that's why we're here doing the live stream, and we're going to talk. Mike, thanks for tuning in from Kenner, Louisiana. We've been going back and forth talking about the severe risk down there. Right now, you got a lot of precursor shower activity happening towards Lafayette, Baton Rouge, just to the west of Baton Rouge, and Port Arthur, so that could possibly help our case just a little bit. Just a little bit. Let me pull you back over here. This was the thumbnail from earlier. I'll show you the current severe risk. Let me fix this. Go to Storm Prediction Center, and there you have it. Large-scale severe risk for everybody down there. You can see just an enormous swath of level 3 from southeast Arkansas through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. It starts to taper off, and I think Storm Prediction Center does a fantastic job of showing us that there will be some weakening in this feature as it moves east because we lose the daytime hours. Mr. Orwell A., greetings to you as well. It is very good to see you too. Let me go ahead and wipe myself back over. There you go. Happy to see everybody. Laura, you're very welcome. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. Yeah, big time, Mike. You're definitely in it. All right, so let's take you through some of the model data. So first and foremost, this is what I was looking at earlier. This is for the Orlando International Airport. I was dialing in our forecast for locally, trying to see exactly what kind of a risk we have for some significant weather action. And It's very interesting to see what we have going on because we have what's called a pseudo loaded gun sounding, in my opinion. We have some subsidence aloft, a bit of an inversion in the mid levels there that you guys can see about maybe 5 to 10,000 feet up. We have where the red line suddenly goes away from the green line, but at the surface we are uncapped. And it looks like the HRRR has really brought down. No, it hasn't. Hold on a second. Let's go forward in time. There we go. Uncapped environment. Looks like we top out at about 1,400 joules per kilogram of CAPE. So that's fairly impressive. Fairly impressive for what Florida is used to. But now, before we go any further, let's set the stage. We got to talk everything big picture that's going on. So there's our storm system right now per the 12Z GFS. We have that system cranking, and I would honestly argue that it is a bit further to the southeast than where the model has it progged. And I'll show you that right now. If we switch over to the water vapor, I don't have my Epic Pen tool on this computer, and I don't think you guys can see my cursor, but it looks like the low pressure center is currently moving due east through western and central Oklahoma. And I wonder if this is going to pay dividends in where it is we realize our severe weather, because originally a lot of our models were progging it to form along the Oklahoma and Kansas border and move to the north. Let's walk through the model data now together and see if that's changed. So it does look like we're capturing that more due easterly movement initially, but it still wants to pull the low north into Missouri, Iowa, and then northern Illinois as a 978 millibar low. That is strong. I want you to kind of put that into perspective there. Let me take you full screen so you can really take that in. 978 millibars is equivalent to a Category 2 hurricane. That is a powerful system right there. So you will have prolific severe weather on the south and east quadrant of it, and on the north side in the upper Great Lakes through Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa there, Missouri, wrapping around into the eastern border of Nebraska and Kansas, you will likely have blizzard conditions for sure. For sure. And yes, I do agree with Mimi Love Good Law over on YouTube. Please hit that like button. We got to tickle the algorithm and get it back on our side. Just weather's been kind of plummeting a little bit. Both Jonathan and myself are working hard to get this channel back up to speed before the hurricane season especially. So as we go further through time, you notice that the low pressure starts to slowly stall out. What's happening is it's called maturing. It's maturing into a cold core system. It's pulling away from its parent jet stream, or it's supporting jet stream, and it's building its own little cold pocket aloft. And you can see that frontal appendage drags as far south as South Florida for sure. We're going to get some rainfall from this here in Central and South Florida, looking at a severe risk for the upper 1/3 of the Florida Peninsula, to include a level 2 risk for our neighbors to the immediate north in Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Flagler County, Putnam County, the upper corner of Marion County, and I know that Alachua County is also in there. And I can show you that here in a moment. And then on a side note, if you go a little further through time, we're also tracking another weak perturbation, another weak system that comes through the low pattern, the low latitude pattern there. You can see another shot for rain for all of us down there from the eastern half of Texas through Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, and then into Florida. A little bit more lackluster than what the Euro is showing. If I'm not mistaken, the European model has a bit more of a pronounced low pressure down there. Yeah, right there. You can see it. Can see it down there in the southeast, just off the Big Bend coastline, which I know that the folks over at Wesh 2 are going crazy with their Lezax recurring cycle. Dream Talking with Vicky, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Yeah, so I'll also pull that up for you as well. Let me bring us back to links. I'm going to take us full screen again so we can look at day 2. Day 2 gets even more extravagant for a lot of us here on the East Coast. You can see just a large plume of level 2. Then we have that isolated instance of level 3 for Southeast Virginia, the eastern half to its entirety of North Carolina. I have family up there that have to watch. And then the eastern, we'll say 1/3 of South Carolina, and then the cutoff is right there on the South Carolina-Georgia border. But of course, weather does not behave in straight lines, so we have to anticipate there could be just a little bit of bleed over there for the eastern tip of Georgia. And then if you look down into our neck of the woods, We've got that level 2 risk now expanded through Gainesville, Palm Coast, all the way up through Jacksonville to the Florida-Georgia state line. And then to the north of the I-4 corridor, we're all under the level 1 marginal risk for damaging straight line winds and a very, very, very low potential for a rogue funnel cloud or two. And in my personal opinion, I think if we do get any funnel activity, it'll probably be up near Sanford, New Smyrna Beach, Cape Canaveral, Daytona, Palm Coast, kind of like right up against the water. We get a little bit more of that low-level inflow from the Gulf Stream just off our coastline. I'm not too sure we'll get any real significant tornado parameters to come together near the attractions, Orlando, Leesburg, the Villages, etc. Interior Florida. Good morning, David, from Robert in Orange Park. Good to see you, my friend, and it is excellent to see you as well, Robert. Thank you so much for the warm greeting. Ethan, wait, that says Thursday. I thought we'd be seeing the storm here Wednesday. Did it move back a day? It did not, and I made sure to change that for my web story that I wrote earlier today. I'm not too sure why the day 2 is reflected as Thursday. This is Wednesday. This is definitely Wednesday. Let me go ahead and change that for you as well. It's a token that's built into the system, but since this is my overlay, it's not going to change anything. I'm going to change that right there, Wednesday. So there you go. I'll save that since this is in my show. Don't want to go confusing anybody. Now let's pull up our cloud and rain model, courtesy of our in-house model. Let me go down to the lower portions here. Take this up. This was also for my web story. Let me get that out of the way so we can clear the picture. And let's zoom us out. Let's zoom us out so we can take us through hour by hour. So this is where we are now. This is an hour or so earlier, 11 a.m. if you notice the timestamp just underneath the banner from the clouds and rain. That's what we have ongoing currently. And I'll admit, it looks like this model is already kind of underdoing the convection that we have in Louisiana. We have a more definitive line that's moving through Louisiana right now, as you saw on the radar composite. I'll take you full screen so we can go hour by hour. By 2 p.m. in the afternoon, we'll be almost done in Arkansas and the upper half of Louisiana before Baton Rouge, New Orleans has to batten down the hatches and hold on to your butts. If you notice, though, the Barron model seems to think our greater significant weather risk will actually be up there near St. Louis, Memphis, Nashville, upper portions of Mississippi, the northeast half of Arkansas, and only some isolated discrete stuff, isolated discrete action down there in the boot of Louisiana. I do not want us to take our eyes off of this, however, because this is a bit of an outlier. The HRRR and the NAM 3 kilometer are still fairly bullish and aggressive on what they're thinking in terms of thunderstorm action for Louisiana and the southern half of Mississippi, which is why Storm Prediction Center has the overlay the way that they do. And I'll actually put that on here so you can get a feel for it. Let's go Storm Prediction Center. There's day 1. Let me go ahead and adjust the opacity on it so we can still see our radar. There you go. I'll go a little bit further than that. Let me take down the opacity just a little bit more. Beautiful. Now we can see where our risk zone is, and we can track it through with the model. So this is now 5 p.m., and as you can see, most of the threat is just about done for Louisiana, Arkansas, maybe the eastern border as the sun is beginning to set. We're still seeing just a little bit of that activity. You're probably in the damaging wind, gusty wind quadrant of it by now. The tornado risk will be off to your east if you live in Arkansas and the upper half of Louisiana. Baton Rouge, New Orleans, your tornado risk will still be ongoing, as well as all through the midst of interior Mississippi. And then as you progress further through time, notice what happens here. This is where it gets a little weird, because if you notice our model, the in-house model, and I'll show you the NAM 3 kilometer, I'll show you the HRRR as well. If you look closely, and I'll telestrate for you, I'll draw it in so you can see. Our in-house model seems to think our strongest risk for severe will be up here, and that's away from where the level 3 is, down through the southern half of Mississippi and Alabama. If you can't see it too well, I have it drawn in there. That sideways going line is where the border between the level 3 enhanced and the level 2 slight risk is. And the in-house model seems to think all of our major action tornadoes, damaging winds, etc. is going to be north of where Storm Prediction Center has it currently. So I don't know. I will openly admit the last few times I've relied on our in-house model, it has kind of flopped. The biggest day I can recall will be the Daytona 500. The Barron model here that we're looking at predicted that the rain would settle into Daytona Beach around 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Daytona 500 should have been fine, no rain delay. The NAM and the HRRR, on the other hand, had the rain settling in at about 2 o'clock, and that's exactly what we saw. The Daytona 500 was delayed a few hours. They tried to get underway at 1:30, and then there was a big old rain delay because the model here missed, and the HRRR and the NAM verified. And, obviously that's not what caused the delay, but you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. So as we go further in time, now as we go through the overnight hours, it's very crucial that we pay attention to that timestamp there. This is 1 o'clock in the morning. I had a lot of folks asking on TikTok what's going to be happening in Georgia, eastern Tennessee, and the eastern bottom half of Alabama. So there's a couple of different dynamics here. First off, we still have a warm feed from the Gulf helping to fuel the bottom half of that frontal line there. However, if you look at the time, 1 o'clock in the morning, we're going to be fairly cool out. We're going to try to stabilize just a little bit because obviously we've lost the daytime influence of the sun. So one thing the model does do a good job on is showing how those convective complexes, I'll call them, do weaken as we go through the overnight hours. Now, I'll shift the camera over just a little bit so we can get into the mid-Atlantic, and I'll zoom us out some because now we're starting to get into the Day 2 threat zone, which encompasses Central Florida all the way up to Virginia. This is 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Now watch how that front re-intensifies right there, especially for the mid-Atlantic. So I definitely think the mid-Atlantic from Virginia all the way down to southeastern Georgia will have to pay close attention tomorrow as the sun comes back up. And then even here in Florida, the in-house model does seem to think that Flagler County, St. Augustine, Volusia County, and maybe outerlying portions of Marion, Seminole, Lake Sumter County, if you're a Central Floridian, will have to watch for an embedded strong thunderstorm or two. And then finally, as we go through tomorrow night, we are fully clear. We transition to the backside of this system. We still stay in the gusty wind quadrant, but we start to forego all that severe weather, and the frontal line can move off into the Atlantic, become a problem for Bermuda. No offense, Bermuda, but we're going to be kicking it in your direction. Now let's go to the NAM. Going to pull up the NAM cloud and rain model here, and we'll take you through the exact same time frame. Let me adjust the time settings. We'll go local time, and we'll go 72 hours out so we can capture the full model. All right. So this is what the NAM is thinking, pretty in line with the Barron model. However, now if you look, the NAM model does keep that threat further to the south. Notice up here through Kentucky and Tennessee, we still have some moderate thunderstorms and some heavy rainfall, but the bulk of our significant stuff now lines up with where Storm Prediction Center has it indicated, with a nice feed of discrete thunderstorms still funneling in out of the western and central Gulf. This is 8 p.m. tonight. It should be right overhead, if not just to your immediate east. Mike out there in Kenner, Louisiana. You'll be just about done with this system. Then it loses a bit of its luster as it moves through Georgia and then into the Florida Panhandle before we backbuild as the sun comes up and things get a little chaotic again for the afternoon hours of Wednesday. Fairly in line with what we've been seeing. And then finally, last but not least, I will pull up the HRRR. Just make sure my time settings are okay because I had this adjusted for a show that I was doing a couple days prior. And let me make sure I'm pulling up the right model. I don't want, that's 0Z, I want 12Z. And I want 12Z here. Beautiful. Let's zoom you on out so we can see. We'll walk through this together. In the last few severe weather instances, the HRRR has probably done the best, followed by the NAM 3 kilometer, and then the Barron model. That's why we went in this order. I started off with what I believe is probably going to be the least reliable model, and that's not saying that it's completely garbage, but it's got its quirks. Not going to exactly put all of my faith and confidence and stock into it. Then we had the NAM 3 kilometer, which doesn't do bad, and then through observation, I've noticed the HRRR, the Rapid Future Radar here, has done the best with these thunderstorm instances. So as we go through time, same general lineup. You can see for the 2 to 5 o'clock hour, that's when the eastern half of Louisiana and Mississippi are going to get underway. And we still have that discrete threat For southeastern Louisiana, New Orleans, Kenner, Louisiana as well, Mike. I'm talking to you, my friend. And then central and southern Alabama, not Alabama, I'm so sorry, Mississippi are going to be dealing with a lot of that discrete action and straight line wind activity. So expect power outages out through there. Then you can see we get a little bit more of that enhancement before the full effect of the daytime or the nighttime cooling can take effect. We see the weakening of that frontal line, and then it back builds when the sun starts to come up again. Kind of a bit of a downtrend for us in Central Florida and Southeast Georgia. According to the HRRR, I think the model is thinking we're going to have a bit more leftover stability from overnight and some insulation going on from cloud cover that could be building in out ahead of the front. And I think that's why the Cape values have come down just a little bit. Still do think we're going to realize some moderate intensity thunderstorms and gusty winds here in Florida, but we shall see what the latter half of the day today brings with us in terms of our model output. And then up in the Carolinas, as we go through the lunch hour and into the middle portions of the day, that's when things are really going to ramp up for you guys in Virginia, North and South Carolina. Tennessee, I don't really think you're going to have too much to worry about. The eastern half of Tennessee, same thing with Kentucky. The Midwest, you're going to be more so in the cold sector of this system and then into that backside blizzard, wintry mix sector of this system. So I don't really think you're going to have to do battle with any of the severe thunderstorms. It'll be more of a wintry mix. And when I say wintry mix, you're going to be transitioning in and out of rain, possibly sleet, and especially the snowfall if you get onto the western side of where the low pressure center is. And you can see it if I go a little further in time right there. See all that snowfall for Tennessee, Kentucky. So actually, for the Midwest and the lower Great Lakes, you guys are going to be going in and out of it over the next 24 hours. You're going to have to do battle with the heavier rainfall than what's called the stratiform rainfall nearest to where the warm front is moving up from the south. And then as that low really wraps up and matures, that's when the blizzard conditions and the snowfall is going to begin for you all. And that'll be during the latter half of Wednesday and especially overnight. Checking the chat real quick to see if there are any questions. I saw that C. Michelle Sparks had asked if this was Wednesday. Yes, we're going through today and then tomorrow, Wednesday. Here are our wind gusts with this system. It's going to be very windy, very, very windy. And I'll take us full screen so you can watch closely what happens. This is what's going to help to force all that warm, moist air from the south all the way up to the Great Lakes. And you can see some fairly rocking winds out there. If I go back just a little bit, Little Rock hitting 51 mile an hour during the strongest gusts that this system has to offer. And that should be happening right now. Little Rock, northern Louisiana, we should be getting into the strongest core of winds out there in New Orleans. Mike, you can testify to this. You should be having pretty blustery southerly flow out there. You should be anywhere between 25 to 35 mile an hour gusts out of the south, approaching 40 as we get into the middle afternoon hours of today. That's going to continue to transition off to the east. Look at Nashville with 56, 57 mile an hour winds up there as that cold front comes through and the low pressure itself continues to deepen down. Charlotte peaking at about 50, 55 miles an hour. Central Florida, South Florida gusting 25 to 35 miles an hour. On average, it's safe to assume that if you are in any close proximity to this system, and when I say close proximity, since it's such a big system, I'm talking from the East Coast, the upper United States-Canadian border, down to the Gulf Coast line, you will be anywhere between 25 to 40 miles an hour on average, just due to the gradient forces around this system. And when I say gradient, I mean both temperature-wise and pressure-wise. We have high pressure out over the western Atlantic, the eastern coastline of the U.S., coupled with this deepening low-pressure system, and then the temperature differences on either side of it as the cold air wraps in on the back, the warm air floods in on the front side. That's going to create some pretty strong winds. Yeah, we're not going to get too cold with this. In reality, the reason we're having the severe weather that we are is because we're so moist and warm out ahead of it. We're welcoming in a fresh dose of polar air. This is no longer Arctic air. No longer Arctic air. The Arctic jet, the polar vortex has really retrograded to the north. I think we're truthfully done with our Arctic blasts and all that jazz. We are definitely seeing more of a springtime pattern with this than we are a wintertime pattern. And that says a lot. That means, we're going to be moving into a very active period of the calendar year. You can look at the latest temperature outlook here, courtesy of Climate Prediction Center. And the further north you go, Florida is now bathed with above average temperatures for the middle portions of March. Same thing with our friends up to the northern half of the state. The southeast for Georgia, Alabama should be right around average, which, again, take that with a grain of salt. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cool. It just means that if you're looking at 70, 80-degree weather this time of year, that's exactly where you're going to be. And then we'll be above average in terms of the warm department as we get into the southern central plains, the lower Midwestern states, the lower Great Lakes. And that's a sign of us transitioning to what's called a negative Pacific North American oscillation, where we get a big old ridge to start building in over the eastern half with some troughing and amplified jet stream action out west. So we're flipping the pattern again, and that's why we're getting such a significant weather event. Northwest Florida, you'll have to watch out of the south. You'll have to, if you're in the panhandle of Florida, as we go through overnight tonight between 8 to 10 p.m. and then on till about 3 a.m. is where we're going to have most of our stuff and our action going from Pensacola to the Big Bend of Florida. We are at 28 miles an hour out of the south-southeast, gusting to 40 already. Oh, yeah. That's that low-level jet really ripping up through there. So that is a sign that there is some severe weather activity ongoing. So switch you back over to the models, and before we wrap up, we got to take a break here in a little bit. I've been streaming back-to-back on different platforms. There was something else I wanted to show you all. What was it? I just suddenly forgot. What a bummer. What a bummer. There's that system that's expected to pass through this weekend. Fairly low threat, low latitude. That's right. That's what I wanted to show you all. 1 second. Let's come over here. I wanted to show you the water temperatures, not for the sake of the tropics, but because we have a very interesting setup going on. So our subtropics are warm. The Gulf is abnormally warm, and we actually have our eastern ENSO regions, 3 and 1+2, that have cranked up to El Nino characteristics. The 1 and 2 off the South America coast is actually at a strong El Nino point right now at about 1.4, 1.5 degrees Charlie. The reason I bring this up is because as we go into the spring, we're not to the calendar start of the spring just yet. We've started the meteorological spring. That could have implications on where it is we see our severe weather set up through the rest of March and especially April and then May. So I promise I'm not trying to talk tropics here. I did that on my channel last night. This is for the sake of severe weather and spring tornado season. And that's, I think it's very interesting out there. If I show you the water temperatures, this is the 3.4. And notice, we're not even in a La Nina now. We're still characterized as a La Nina because we have a pretty dense, cool pool in the central and western ENSO equatorial waters. And that's a mouthful, but that's just where the El Nino, La Nina sectors are, equatorial Pacific. The 3-4 is typically where you get most of your enhanced phenomena, and we're creeping right to about a neutral point at this point, which is very bizarre. If I switch it to the 1 and 2, look at that. All the way up to 1.4 positive. That is a strong El Nino. At least it would be considered a strong El Nino. Not saying we're in a strong El Nino. Obviously, NOAA and the big wigs out there will make that delineation, but it's very interesting to note that we have some very crazy evolutions occurring in the Pacific. Same thing with our ENSO 3 region. Whoops, that's the same one. I fat-fingered that. You go to the ENSO 3, and bam, we're creeping into El Nino territory there as well. So the 3-4 is right about on the brink of a neutral. The 3, El Nino. The 1+2, big-time El Nino. And then the 4 is holding on. So I really do think you couple that with the warmth we have in the Gulf. That's probably not going anywhere at this point because we're not going to be seeing long, consistent bursts of cold, freezing temperatures like we saw early, middle January. That warmth is there to stay, especially supported by the Gulf Stream and supported by the warm feed coming out of the Caribbean in the form of the loop current. I do think that's going to play a pivotal role for our friends out there in East Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Mike, I'm looking at you, and Mississippi. Dixie Alley, the Deep South, will probably have to deal with some pretty hellacious severe weather if that warmth really sticks around and we continue to see the trade winds over the equatorial Pacific weaken and allow those waters to warm back up to neutral, if not El Nino-style characterization. So I'll be very curious to see exactly what Climate Prediction Center and NOAA does with that information as we go through the middle portions of this month. So that's all I got. I will go ahead and leave you with the live Doppler radar one more time before we wrap up the stream. Go ahead and pull that up for you all. Oh, wow. So yeah, let me go ahead and pull that up. I'll bring you back over so you can see we have 2 active tornado warnings out there right now. It is 12 o'clock, 12:01 p.m. We have 2 active tornado warnings right on the leading edge of that system, and it does look like it's really intensifying. If I zoom us down in, you can kind of see it headed right toward Leesville, heading right towards Leesville. There's definitely some pretty good rotation in there. You can see how the line on the north side and the line on the south side is very thin, but then you have that big old bubble, that dome of larger red returns there. That shows that there's probably some mixing and some spinning going on in there. That's usually what you look for on the leading edge of these linear systems. So this is going to be the song and dance. Even though our tornadic activity has not been too off the chain just yet, we've had a consistent line of severe damaging winds knocking out power out there. Let me see if I can pull up the power outages. Aha, there we go. So we have quite a few power outages across our area, not our area, excuse me. We have 370 people without power out there in Texas. We have 12,500 customers out there in Louisiana without power. We also have 5,000 customers in Arkansas without power. And believe it or not, Mississippi has 4,000 people without power right now, probably unrelated to this storm system. But as you can see, this is going to be what rhythm we maintain for the next 12 to 18 hours. So be prepared for the power outages. Be prepared for very strong winds. If you're out ahead of this line, it's not going to weaken over the next 6 to 8 hours. It'll probably start to lose some of its punch as we go between 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., the coolest portions of the overnight hours. So you need to make sure you figuratively batten down the hatches, bring any loose objects in, make sure you have things ready to rock and roll for at least a small window of a loss of power. Because as you can see, we have 370 people without it in Texas, and that's where the line just swept through from about McKinney, Dallas, Tyler, down to College Station. Houston is still under that special weather statement. Beaumont is getting into it right now, and this is going to continue to transition off towards the east. Daniel Schwartz, good to see you over in the live chat. Thank you so much for joining in. Cheryl says, thanks so much, Naz. Appreciate you guys so very much. Take care and much love. Likewise, back at you. Shameless plug, Jonathan and I are going to be working behind the scenes to come up with our own preseason hurricane season forecast, since everyone else is starting to release theirs as well. So we'll be talking more about that, as well as taking a couple of deep dives down the road to see exactly what we could possibly expect in terms of what our Enzo could possibly do and the severe weather season as we go through the back half of March and or more presently, April and May. And then obviously we all know what comes right after May. Starts with an H and ends with season. But that is all she wrote, folks. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. I will pop live once again tomorrow to get you further up to speed on what exactly is happening, kind of do an after-action report on what's happening in Dixie Alley, the Deep South right now. I will be popping in and out of Instagram and TikTok live, so if you would be so kind as to go find me on Instagram, WXCenter_Nazario. You can find me on TikTok as well, same username, WXCenter_Nazario. I will be doing updates, whether it be through my story, through live updates, and actual posts and recordings that I'll be doing throughout the day today. I definitely have to push pause now, go get some lunch. I'm starving, and my throat is starting to hurt. I am out of coffee. I got to go make another Woweezy run, as I like to call it, with my buddies, and go get a fresh batch of caffeine because there's still a lot to dig into. Not only because of this, but because I'm doing another Tropic stream on Friday, breaking down the 2025 hurricane season. So, folks, have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. It is 12:05. If you're out there for lunch right now, be safe, enjoy, and we will talk to you again very soon. But until then, as I would say on my other channel, this is the Digital Weather Center.